Amen. Good evening. Hello. So welcome to the fourth class. I'm glad there's some new faces here tonight. Tonight's class is going to be on the pancreas, and we'll be spending a very large majority of the class actually talking about diabetes and how food relates to that more than anything. So first, before I actually get into talking about the pancreas, and this isn't going to be on your notes, but I just wanted to share just my heart with you guys a little bit, my ultimate vision that I have. I'm going to start with the scripture. It's in Philippians. It's Philippians 2:14 and 15. And it says, "Do all things without complaining or grumbling and disputing or arguing, that you may become blameless and harmless or innocent children of God." And I say this scripture, and it just kind of struck my heart because, you know, I have my opinions, okay, as we all do, especially when it comes to this field and what I do. And I find a lot of times that I'm kind of on one side of the coin, and I sometimes shut out the other side, and it seems to happen that way on both sides of this type of issue when it comes to talking about healthcare, natural health, quote unquote, versus conventional medical care. And I just want to make it really clear that that I don't want it to be like these are two separate entities battling against each other, because it's not. And that's not where my heart is. My heart is to help people. And whatever I can do and whatever means we can use to help the most people should be our ultimate goal. And we need the conventional medical community to do that. There's a lot of great things happening in medicine, a lot of great advances that have been made in medicine. Is the system perfect? Absolutely not. You know, there's a lot of problems in the system, but I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm anti-conventional medicine, because that's absolutely not the case. And you'll see tonight in the message that we're going to be discussing tonight, especially when we're talking about something as serious as diabetes, this is an issue where it's absolutely critical that we have the cooperation of the medical community, of medical doctors. It's critical, because there's things that they do that I can't do, and there's things that I know and do that they don't know about. So we need to come to a place where we have some cooperation. The ultimate goal, you know, just like Hippocrates said, first do no harm. That's the Hippocratic oath that all doctors take. That we should be providing the best care to people at the best prices that does the least amount of harm. And they should have the choice to do what they want with their bodies. The choice to utilize whichever system or method they feel is best for them and their health and their family. So I just think that's critically important that people talk to their doctors. That's one of the main points I want to get across here is we need to talk to our doctors. Again, when it comes to this message we're going to talk about tonight, and we're talking about diabetes, we need to have communication. A lot of times people go to their doctors and they say, "Well, why are you taking that medication?" "Well, my doctor said so." Well, we're not asking questions, and we need to be informed. We need to be educated about what's going on. If you decide through your studies, through things you've heard, through testimonies from other people, through experiences that you've experienced yourself, that you want to heal your body naturally without the use of pharmaceuticals or doing surgery or things of that nature, you should have the option to do that. But I encourage you to partner with your doctor in doing so. And if your doctor is not willing to partner with you, it's okay to find another doctor. There are more and more and more medical doctors who are becoming very, very open to natural therapies. And why? Because they work. And they have a heart to help people too. I think a lot of times we get this impression that, medical doctors aren't wanting to help people because all they do is give out drugs. Well, I don't think that's the case. I think the problem is more the system than it is individual people. I don't think anybody would find that a surprise for me to say that. It's the system that's been developed. It's not the individual people. And we need partners. We need partners. I'm not here to make enemies with anybody. That doesn't do us any good. We're to be shining lights, right? So my goal is not to focus on the negative or focus on what someone else is doing wrong or what the system is doing wrong. My goal is to focus on the positive and see how we can help the most people. So I just wanted to share that before we really get started, because bottom line is I admit that I need the medical community. I don't do blood work at my office. I can't check blood sugars. I can't check A1C levels. Okay, I can't put diabetics on a sliding scale to see how much insulin they need. We need medical doctors to do that, and ideally, soon, we start to develop a system where we start to work together. And that's not happening a lot now, but it's starting to happen more and more. You're starting to see glimpses of it. But it really comes down to you guys helping to do that by talking to your doctor, saying, I do want to have other choices. I want to work with this guy that does natural therapies, and I want to work with you too, because I think between the two of you, I can get well. So I just think that's really important to understand. And my ultimate heart is for the medical community to admit that they need us as well, that they need natural therapists. Okay, so let's get going. The pancreas, function and purpose. Pancreas is about the size of a banana. It'd actually be kind of a smashed banana. And it actually sits right here under your rib cage on the left side. Okay, the head of the pancreas is actually right here under the rib cage, and it actually wraps around all the way almost to the backside where the tail of the pancreas would be. And it serves multiple functions. One of the functions of the pancreas is to secrete digestive juices and enzymes. It's really one of the main things the pancreas does. It helps us with digestion. It helps us process the foods that enter our body. The other critical thing it does is it produces insulin. Letter B, produces insulin when necessary. Now, insulin's a hormone. Yes, we secrete extra insulin when we need it because of the sugars entering the body, but it actually serves another other functions as well, as I mentioned on the sheet here: cell proliferation and replication, stimulating growth, DNA synthesis. And bodybuilders even use insulin because it can help them to build muscle and store protein. It also stores magnesium, which is very important as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but a lot of people who have blood sugar issues are really magnesium deficient because insulin stores magnesium, so you lose that when you start to develop these problems. So the pancreas is secreting insulin, especially when there's sugars in the bloodstream. And the more sugar that's in the bloodstream, the more insulin that needs to be produced. And if there's more that can be used, the body will actually start to store it and convert it into glycogen and put it in the liver. That's kind of reserves for later, kind of on an as-needed basis. But once you fill up your glycogen stores in your liver, if there's excess sugar in the bloodstream and the body can't get rid of it, it turns it into fat and stores it. It's a fat storage mechanism. And this is really fascinating because the body actually has multiple different mechanisms to increase sugars in the body. Well, why is that? If you think about the body and the way it's designed for survival, right? So it's designed to, the old fight or flight, right? To run away from something or to fight if you have to, if you don't have a choice. So there has to be multiple mechanisms in which the body can increase sugars in the body to give us fuel. And that's done through not just the foods we eat, but that also is done through some of these backup systems, like the liver storing some glycogen for when we need it, the adrenal glands, which can help produce cortisol, which will increase our sugar levels when we need it. And there's other mechanisms that do that as well in the body. But what's really interesting is the body only has one mechanism to get excess sugar out of the bloodstream, and that's insulin. So what that says to me is that because we were designed for, survival, we were never designed to have an overabundance, an over excess of food or of sugar in our body and our bloodstream. Otherwise, we'd have other mechanisms to get rid of it, and we don't. Letter C. The pancreas also secretes enzymes to protect us from disease. So letter C, letter D, we're going to be talking about just real quick. I just want to give you a quick history on enzymes because it's just absolutely fascinating. Dr. John Beard, in the early 1900s, he actually took the juices from a pancreas of an animal and he would inject it into his patients. And some of his research, he actually injected these pancreatic juices directly into a tumor growing on a person. And in over half the cases, the tumor reduced in size or completely disappeared. So this started an explosion of research about enzymes. He wrote a book about it, and you can actually still get this. It's called The Enzyme Treatment of Cancer and Its Scientific Basis. This was in 1907. Then in the 1930s, Dr. Max Wolf, he studied blood a lot, and he was looking in blood, and he found that there was, under a microscope, that there was this certain molecule in the body that was going after and attacking cancer cells and killing them. And upon further research, he found what they were enzymes. And so he started studying and researching enzymes, and one of the main enzyme factories in your body is the pancreas. So he actually took sheep's pancreas and gave it to his patients who had pancreatic cancer because he found the people that had pancreatic cancer were not producing these enzymes anymore. The pancreas had stopped producing these enzymes. He fed the people sheep pancreas, the cancer reversed itself. So another exciting area of research. And there's a lot more. There are literally thousands and thousands of published studies about the benefits of enzyme therapy. So again, unfortunately, this is something you normally hear about. It's not standard medical practice today. But these kind of things, have been working for cancer and other types of diseases for over 100 years. Letter E, the pancreas serves a critical role in our health. Unfortunately, it is overlooked and underappreciated oftentimes in medicine. We don't hear a lot about problems with the pancreas. Even in a diabetic, we don't hear a lot of talk about the pancreas. What can we do for the pancreas? Do we need to heal the pancreas? No, it all seems to be about blood sugar balance, and it's a lot more complicated than that. But we do hear about pancreatitis, which is just inflammation of the pancreas. There is quite a high rate of pancreatic cancer in our society as well. So something else to be concerned about. Letter F. Just real quick, we'll talk more about it, but I just want to give you a real brief definition of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is actually an autoimmune condition where the body is seemingly attacking the insulin-secreting cells of the pancreas. Now, because of this, the pancreas stops producing insulin, and you cannot survive without insulin because of all the functions I mentioned that it does earlier. It's more than just helping with blood sugars. It serves a lot of other purposes. So a type 1 diabetic has to have insulin shots. So that's one thing that has been created by the medical community that's fantastic and very life-saving for those types of people that have type 1 diabetes. The type 2 diabetes, adult onset, is from poor diet. And we can blame genetics and other things all we want, but the bottom line is it's poor choices when it comes to our diet, and we're going to talk about how to fix that. And type 2 diabetes, sometimes people are given insulin, and that's not really the answer. In type 2 diabetics, they're actually producing insulin, but they're developing a resistance. So we'll talk more about that in detail a little bit later. The bottom line is in both type 1 or type 2 diet's what matters. So Roman numeral 2, diabetes. Letter A, diabetes is a potentially deadly metabolic syndrome. So I'm going to talk just about some of the statistics that are out there. And these are directly from, for example, the Center for Disease Control says there was 1.9 million new cases diagnosed in 2010. Now remember, these are just cases diagnosed. there's a lot of undiagnosed cases out there. In fact, I would venture to safely say that there's more undiagnosed cases of diabetes than there are diagnosed cases of diabetes. I read an article one time, I think it might have been in Natural News, where they were saying upwards of about a third of the country is probably diabetic, more like 33%. We just don't know it. But if you look at the rise in diabetes, it was actually fairly rare, except within the last 300 years. But it's really only skyrocketed within the last 100 years. So I don't know if we can logically come to any other conclusion than the fact that it has something to do with our diets. If you look at Hippocrates, for example, he actually wrote about a couple of cases of diabetes. If you look at Galen, who was around during the Roman Empire, I think he was known to have written about 2 cases of diabetes in his entire career. So it's not like this hasn't existed, but not like it is today. There's definitely something very, very wrong. According to the National Diabetes Information Clearinghouse, there are 25.8 million diagnosed diabetics. And what's interesting is 25% of all people over 65 are diagnosed diabetic. So 1 out of every 4 people over 65. And there's 215,000 cases, which to me it sounds really probably very, very low, under the age of 20, because it's happening more and more and more and more in children. And diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney failure, the #1 cause of limb amputation, and the #1 cause of blindness. So it's very serious. And it's also almost anybody who's diabetic, well, I shouldn't say almost, if you're diagnosed diabetic, your risk of heart disease and stroke just skyrocket astronomically. In 2007, diabetes cost Americans $174 billion. And this is according to the American Diabetes Association. The cost per diabetic is $11,744 per year. Now, I like math, but this is pretty simple math. But to me, this is about $1,000 a month. So how would you like to have an extra $1,000 a month in your pocket? It's an expensive disease. And if people aren't able to learn how to reverse this, then this is $1,000 a month for the rest of your life. This is the average cost. It's really ironic to me because, working in the natural health field, it's just one of the things I hear about, I want to eat healthy, but it's so expensive. I'd like to get that supplement, that green supplement, but it's $30 and that's not in my budget. Sometimes that might be the case, but I think it's interesting to where we prioritize. People go out to eat 3-4 days a week, but won't spend money on supplements or something that's good for them. Or they'll unfortunately get one of these illnesses and they don't have a choice. They have to find $1,000 a month. Yet it's too expensive to eat healthy. So just chew on that. Letter B. Symptoms of diabetes include fatigue, strokes, heart failure from neuropathy, obesity, arteriosclerosis, elevated blood pressure, cholesterol, triglycerides, impotence, retinopathy, renal failure, which is kidney failure, liver failure, polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, elevated blood sugar, systemic candida, which is an infection, impaired carbohydrate metabolism, poor wound healing, impaired fat metabolism, and peripheral neuropathy. I mean, these are serious, serious, serious issues. Letter C. So far, the conventional approach to diabetes has included oral pharmaceutical drugs and insulin injections. Although insulin injections have been critical and life-saving for type 1 diabetes, it remains a questionable therapy for type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is also known as non-insulin dependent diabetes. But unfortunately, we see a lot of type 2 diabetics actually being given insulin now. So the question is why? There needs to be a pharmaceutical strategy that involves dietary changes and or targeted approach to normalize the cellular uptake of glucose by the cells. And here's the key, and this is really important that you catch this. Diabetes drugs and insulin help to normalize blood sugar levels, but it does nothing to stop the disease process. In other words, it's disease maintenance. And diabetes is not a blood sugar disorder. Okay, it's an insulin problem. It's not a blood sugar problem. So if you just take things to artificially balance your blood sugars, you'll still get neuropathy, you'll still get retinopathy, you'll still be overweight. The disease process continues. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, how many people are on metformin and insulin, and 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, they're perfectly healthy? I've never seen it. So this is disease maintenance. And this is one of those cases where, yes, these things can be beneficial to people, especially in the short term while they're working on education and knowledge and getting on a program where they can understand nutrition and reverse this. But this is an area where, again, we need to partner with the medical community, and they need to recognize that diet plays a huge role, and they need to partner with someone with knowledge of how to do it naturally using food. Because diabetes is one illness more than any other that we know for a fact that changing diet fixes it. And I just have to mention this because I actually had a friend in Las Vegas, and these are some of the things that are being told to diabetics, that, you know, as long as you take your insulin shot, you don't really need to change the way you eat. And you hear that a lot. I hear that a lot from people I work with. And it's really sad. I had a friend in Las Vegas who was diabetic, and I mean, he was on insulin, 3-4 times a day. And he was a total sugaraholic. And he was literally eating candy all day long. And when I tried to talk to him about it, he said, well, my doctor says it's fine as long as I make sure and take my insulin. So, this is what's happening. And it's not more than, I've left Las Vegas since, but, before I left, he had gained, I can't remember, he had gained over 50 pounds within 1 year, and it just caught up with him. Because again, you're not going to stop the disease process by taking insulin and eating sugar. Letter D. I already did letter D. No. We need an approach. Yeah, let's see. Did I do? Okay. So balancing blood sugars using pharmaceuticals alone will never bring about the restoration of health. That's the key. Roman numeral 3, the root cause of diabetes. This is a quote from Thomas Edison. Pretty well-known guy. I think all you guys know who Thomas Edison is. He said, the doctor of the future will no longer treat the human frame with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition. Love it. Great quote. Thank you, Mr. Edison. Letter A, diabetes is the inability of the body to metabolize carbohydrates properly, either by not having enough insulin or becoming resistant to insulin. Both leave the person with excessively high blood sugar levels. In the case of type 1 diabetes, no insulin is being produced at all, so insulin shots are critical and necessary. Cow's milk has been strongly tied to type 1 diabetes in numerous studies. In type 2 diabetes, insulin is being produced, but the cells are becoming resistant. I gave you an abstract if anybody wants to search this out, because it's just interesting to me how if you read, I was actually on the American Diabetes Association website today just kind of seeing some of the information that they have out there, but you just hear over and over how we have no idea what causes these diseases. Like, we have no idea where diabetes comes from. We have no idea how people get it. Type 2 diabetes, we absolutely know. Type 1 is a little more questionable, but there are lots of studies that have been done linking it to consuming cow's milk. And here is this link that I gave you is actually PubMed, which a lot of people are familiar with PubMed. It's a government website where they have literally thousands and thousands and thousands of medical research studies posted on the website. And they have multiple studies that they've done that links and shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that increasing cow's milk is linked to type 1 diabetes. So that's something you guys might want to research out. When we talk more about food, we'll talk a little bit about the dairy industry and what's going on with the dairy industry and why people are getting diseases from consuming dairy products. But I don't want to get too much into that right now. Letter B. As mentioned in prior classes, God created a body that was designed to heal and protect itself at all cost. Insulin resistance is no different. So this is fascinating. I mean, I love studying the body and studying these imbalances that are happening in people's body and getting these revelations that everything that's happening is the body trying to get well. And I think it's hard for people to grasp that concept, because the first thing you want to think of is, well, how did my body go wrong? You know, your body didn't go wrong. You know, your body's trying to get well. It's trying to protect itself. It's trying to heal itself. So in the case of diabetes, what happens is when there's so much sugar in the bloodstream and it's constantly being bombarded with sugar in the bloodstream, it's toxic to the body. It's poison to the body. So eventually the cells get to the point where if I take in any more sugar, I am going to kill my host, which is you. I can't do that. I can't take in any more sugar because it's going to kill me. So what it does is it actually builds a protective membrane, a protective layer around the cells to stop the sugar from being able to get into the cells. So then you have blood sugars trapped in your bloodstream. So then you have two more really negative things that happen. The pancreas is going, uh-oh, sugar in the bloodstream, produce more insulin. Insulin, insulin, insulin. Sugar has nowhere to go. It can't get into the cells anymore, and it can't get out because you're still bombarding it with the food. Okay, another problem happens. Third problem. Those cells need sugar. They need fuel. They've built a protective layer around them to keep the sugar out. So guess what? Now you have low blood sugar. Now your body sends a signal to your brain saying, I'm hungry. Where's my food? I'm fatigued. I'm tired. So you get in a constant cycle of eating and never feeling well. I hope that makes sense. I give the example of, like I mentioned earlier, the body is designed for survival, and being active and eating food fresh off the land. It was never designed to have 24/7 grocery stores and fast food places and all the food available we wanted 24/7 and to live a sedentary lifestyle. That's not how the body was designed. What happens when we eat large meals, it's kind of like a cactus in the desert, okay? How often does it rain in the desert? Not very often. So when it rains, the cactus is like, it sucks up that water and it holds onto it because it doesn't know when it's going to get it again. Okay, that's the main reason a lot of people are swelling, edema, because they're chronically dehydrated. The body's holding on to water, saying, I don't know when I'm going to get more. Same thing when you overeat food. When you eat a huge meal that's way more than your body can process, your body goes, all right, I got some extra. I'm going to store that for later. And people get in a chronic cycle of doing that. And that's not how we were designed. So letter D, excess sugars in the bloodstream must now be eliminated at any cost, because we're kind of trapped in this cycle now. The only way the body can eliminate it is insulin, exercise, or through the urine. When excess sugar is not used or eliminated, the body is forced to store it as fat. High insulin levels also tell the body to store fat and retain fluid, which is edema. The combination of high insulin levels and high sugar levels cause the rapid degeneration of nerves, muscles, tissues, and the cardiovascular system. I always give the example of, Michael Phelps, the swimmer guy. He would always brag about how he would eat these huge breakfasts. Did you guys read those articles? He'd eat like 17 pancakes and 8 eggs, and I'm exaggerating, but he ate like these really huge, he ate these really like huge breakfasts. So I give the example of, if you're an Olympic athlete or you're a marathon runner, you can probably get away with eating like one. It might not be ideal, but what's happening in America is we're eating like marathon runners and we're sitting on the couch. That's a problem because the body only has certain mechanisms to get that sugar out of the bloodstream. and it has to deal with it if it can't eliminate it. It's really fascinating about how they used to figure out how people had high blood sugar problems. The Native Americans would actually see if, when they urinated, if the ants were attracted to the urine. That means they had sugar in their urine. And I'm glad we have the test we have available now, because doctors would actually taste the urine of their patients to see if they had sugar in their urine. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. One thing I want to mention too, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the heart class, the cardiovascular class that we're going to do in a couple weeks. But a really, really critical thing to understand in how blood sugar and high blood sugars cause this degenerative state to happen in the body is, one thing that's happened is the cardiovascular system, the blood vessels, have a protective layer around them called endothelial cells. And as blood sugar and insulin stay in the system, it starts to break down the lining of the veins and arteries. And these endothelial cells start to get broken down. And what happens is when there's damage to your blood vessels, again, everything the body does is attempt to heal itself. You can't have holes in your cardiovascular system, right? That would be bad. So when these areas start to get damaged, the body starts to put patchwork in there. It starts to clog it, repair it. It'll stick cholesterol in there. It'll stick minerals floating by, calcium. It doesn't care what it puts in there. It's trying to clog the hole. Okay? So that's a reason that people who are diabetic also have a high risk for heart disease as well, because you start to destroy that lining, that endothelial lining of your blood vessels. But we'll go into more detail about that in a couple of weeks. Letter E, diabetes type 2, not specific to type 1 because it's a little bit different, but type 2 is a dietary problem. Genetics play a very minimal role. From everything I've read and everything I've studied and everything I researched in the natural health field, they say that genetics plays a 1 to 2% role. And to me, genetics gives people an excuse to play victim. And I know that might sound kind of harsh, but unfortunately, I really think that that's what's happening. People are accepting their illnesses, they're accepting their disease states because their mom had it and their grandma had it. And most likely, mom and grandma had it because you've all eaten the same food for 40 years. That's genetics. It really is. Yes, you get things passed on. Yes, children are being born with mercury poisoning because of mercury in the mouth of mothers. Yes, things are passed on to the children. Weaknesses genetically are passed on to the children. Read the Francis Pottinger cat study. It's a cool little book, and I think I've mentioned in a class before, where in the 1930s, Francis Pottinger fed processed food to cats, and in 3 generations, they were infertile and killing each other. So we do get weaker, if we don't treat our body correctly. And we do see children getting diseases that you never, ever, ever saw until people were at least in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, how many people here over 60, when they were growing up, had friends who had diabetes, had friends who were obese? It was rare, if ever. And look at today. So again, there's a major problem. Roman numeral 4, understanding the role of food in pancreas health and in diabetes. Sorry, I'm thirsty. A, diabetes comes from the overconsumption of 2 foods, carbohydrates and fats. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of confusion of what that means. We have to distinguish between what a carbohydrate is and what is a good fat and a bad fat. If you follow, like I said, I was on the American Diabetes Association website today. If you follow their guidelines, you will be diabetic for the rest of your life. I mean, if you look at what they recommend you to eat, it's disease maintenance, unfortunately. Because either they haven't recognized that there is a way to heal it, or they're just denying it. Letter B, the body's most stable fuel sources come from proteins and fats. The body will burn these sustainably over time or convert them into sugars when needed for extra fuel. When simple sugars are consumed, a yo-yo or unstable effect occurs. So here's the key. If glucose and insulin are always, and this is a pretty funny typo because it's supposed to say present and it says pleasant. So they're like, don't worry about me, I'm pleasant, I'm here, I'm hanging out. So if glucose and insulin are always present in the bloodstream, your body will not burn fat. So I'm going to stress this again. Okay, I'm going to try to break this down in case that doesn't make sense. You use sugar for fuel. You do. Okay, that's what your body uses for energy. It's the most readily available source of energy. But if you eat whole foods, your body will convert the food, whether it's a carbohydrate or a fat or a protein, into fuel as it needs it. Okay? Sustainably, slowly. If you put rocket fuel in the body, like Red Bull, you're going to spike and then you're going to crash. Okay, that's not how the body was designed. So as long as there's adequate sugar in the body, your body will burn it and use it if you're active. Now, when we get to these states where there's too much sugar, too much fat in the bloodstream, and again, the body's using the sugar as a fuel source, right? When it has more than it needs, it converts it into fat. We talked about that earlier. The body's going to convert sugar into fat and store it. It's a fat storage mechanism. So as long as you continue to eat bread and pasta and cheese and desserts and soda and candy and all of this sugar, the body says, I got plenty of sugar. I got plenty of fuel. I don't need to burn the fat. I will just store this until later. So in other words, we are training our bodies to store fat. So when you increase your healthy fats and decrease the sugar and carbohydrate consumption, what happens is your body goes, okay, I've used the sugars that I needed from, that sweet potato I had, and I'm out of sugar and I need some more. So there's some protein. I'm going to convert that into sugar and use that. There's some fat. Oh, I can burn that and use that for fuel. Then we train our bodies to burn fat and not store it. Does that make sense? Okay, so as long as you're constantly putting carbs and bread and sugar and things like that in the body, your body will never, ever, ever, ever learn how to burn fat. That's the key. That's the bottom line right there. Letter C. In an inactive society, and I just mentioned like traditional Japanese culture, a lot of people over in Asia, starches such as rice have never been a problem in promoting disease or diabetes because they're active. Okay, they're working all day long. They have an active lifestyle. In an inactive society, and I just use this in general, I don't want to say like United States is a bunch of lazy people, because we're not. But overall, we have desk jobs, and we have to kind of force ourselves to exercise, and unfortunately we are more sedentary than we used to be. We're not all living on farm, homesteads where we're building fences all day and things like we used to about 100 years ago. So things have changed a little bit. So if you have this excessive carbohydrate consumption, you're going to have the high blood sugars, high insulin, and fat storage. That's what's happening. Letter D. Processed sugar is destructive to the human body on many levels. Now, I put on there C separate handout. You don't have the separate handout. It will be on the website, linked to this class, which, if you aren't aware, the whole series is on my website under videos. It says Partnering with God series. I'm going to put this handout on there. I love this handout. I have two different articles. I have a lot of articles about sugar, but there's two specifically I like. This one is 76 reasons why sugar is destroying your health. And I have another one that's 101 reasons why sugar is destroying your health. But the reason I like the 76 one is because then that's not overwhelming to you guys, right? No, I'm just kidding. The reason I like the 76 one is because what's cool about it, what she did, is every single statement she made about the disease process that sugar causes in the body, she linked it to a study and gave you the reference so you can search it out yourself to show that she's not just making this up, that processed sugar causes all of these disease processes. The combination of highly concentrated sugar with an inactive lifestyle will create diabetes over time. Excessive sugar consumption forces the pancreas to produce enzymes and insulin nonstop. Eventually, the pancreas wears out. The history of sugar is really fascinating, so I just want to tell you a little bit about what I know, just because I think it's kind of neat. You didn't hear a lot written about diabetes, as I mentioned, until about the late 1600s. And there was a doctor, his name was Thomas Willis, and he was from England, and he was actually the doctor to the king. And back then, which would be a real cool concept if we could integrate this today, but if the doctor didn't keep the king healthy, they killed him. You know, now that was pretty drastic, but all throughout history, doctors were only paid if their patients were healthy. What a concept, huh? Yeah, praise God for that one. So he was the doctor to the king. And England started importing sugar, processed sugar from overseas. This is in the late 1600s. And Thomas Willis realized that people were getting sick and people were starting to get diseases that he had not seen before. And he wrote about it. Well, when he told the king this, the king said, "Oh, that's good to know. Thanks for letting me know. I'll be careful so I don't die. But don't tell any of the other people because we're making way too much gold off of this sugar trade." So that's pretty interesting. Some things haven't changed, huh? So if you look at sugar, and there's a lot of neat statistics. I think I reference it later. There's a movie called Forks Over Knives, but there's a lot of movies and documentaries that talk about the sugar consumption we've had as a society. In early 1900, they say it was anywhere from like 5 to 15 pounds per person. Now the average sugar consumption per person is 150 pounds. So that means each person is eating an average of a half a pound of sugar every single day, on average. So, you know, there's no wonder we have increased disease. If you look at sugar and what it is, what have we had for thousands of years for sugar? We've had fruit. We've had honey. If you were really, really lucky, you might have lived somewhere where they had maple trees, so you had your maple syrup. But there's only a few natural sources that we have. If you lived somewhere tropical where they had sugar cane, you might have had sugar cane, but that was pretty rare. But even if you look at sugar cane, how did God make sugar cane? Has anybody ever tried to eat some sugar from sugar cane? Yeah, it's a stick, right? Why did God make it a stick? So you wouldn't eat too much. It takes almost a half an acre of sugar cane that they process it down to make a couple of pounds of white processed sugar. We're eating it in hyper-concentrated amounts, way more than that should ever be consumed and put into the human body. And sugar is arguably, in my opinion, the single most dangerous thing that goes into the human body that's linked to the most diseases and degenerative conditions. And let me just say that this is personal for me because I grew up eating sugar, have been addicted to sugar. And, even when I knew how dangerous sugar was, it was really hard for me to come off it. It was a struggle. It was a battle because it's such an addictive substance. I've actually done classes you can watch on my website about sugar addiction. I've done 2 different classes on sugar addiction. They've actually shown in studies that sugar stimulates the same receptors, the same dopamine receptors in the brain that crack and cocaine do. It's that addictive of a substance. And just another side note, why do alcoholics or people who overconsume alcohol have degenerative conditions? What is alcohol? It's sugar. That's all it is. So you're just over-consuming sugar. Now, when you drink alcohol, it just has a quicker toxic effect on the body. Why? Because it's in liquid form, and it's immediately in your bloodstream. So at least if you eat a food that's high in sugar, it still has to go through the digestive process. You get a little bit of help. You get a little bit of protection there. So that's another reason alcohol is so dangerous. E, poor quality fats also cause insulin resistance. So fat in your bloodstream, the high triglycerides, they inhibit the ability of insulin to dispose of glucose in the peripheral tissues. In other words, the body cannot eliminate the sugar if it's clogged with fat. So it's the combination of these two foods that's causing insulin resistance. Combine processed sugar with fatty foods. So where do we combine processed sugar with fatty foods? Donuts, right? French fries, okay? These are double whammy, the worst things you can possibly eat. And people know that they're bad for them. I just don't think it's like they really realize what's happening, you know, the effect that it can have over time. Because obviously eating one donut never killed anybody, right? Unless it got stuck in their throat or something, I don't know. But one donut isn't going to kill you. You know, it was Ann Wigmore. She's a co-founder of the Hippocrates Health Institute down in Florida. And she said, this isn't exactly right, but she said something to the effect of, the food you eat can either be the best, most nutritious form of medicine, or it can be the slowest form of poison. And it is so true. Letter F, understanding the rule of satiety. Now, I actually did a search on that word and went to different websites that pronounced it because I didn't know how to pronounce it. So there might be other ways to pronounce it, but that's how they said it, satiety. Have you ever looked at one of those things? But this is feeling full, okay? Having the full feeling. So what do you need to feel full? There are three things. You must have a high water content. You must have a high fiber content, and it must be nutritionally dense. Not calorically dense, nutritionally dense. Okay, think about what we eat in America. Think about a donut. Not a very high water content, not a very high nutrient content, not a very high fiber content. So what's happening is when you eat these types of foods, these non-foods, these artificial foods, these processed foods, you never feel full. Now, this is something that the fast food industry knows very well. There are people who work in large corporations that I will not name, but you know who they are, who have very, very, very intelligent people working there who make hundreds of thousands of dollars to know what to put on the menu so that you will never get full and you will always come back and crave and want more and more and more and more. So if you look at a fast food menu, one of the things they do is they make sure that their food does not have any water content, does not have any fiber, and does not have any nutrition. Because they know that an hour later, you're still going to feel full, or you're still going to be hungry. Because you haven't given the body anything it needs, and it hasn't sent that signal to the brain that says, I'm full. If you actually look at the menu of, I'll just say it, McDonald's, there's nothing on the menu. You look at the fiber content of everything on the menu, everything has less than 1 gram of fiber. Everything on the menu. It's done that way on purpose, you guys. Okay, they know these things. They know what's going to keep us coming back again and again and again. Your stomach is full with a 500-calorie plant-based meal. Now, this is interesting. I mean, most of you are in the IHOP community, and hopefully we're living a life of prayer and fasting. Most of you here have probably done an extended fast. I mean, raise your hand if you've done a 7+ day fast. Okay. Yeah, over half of you. So what happens when you do a 7-day fast, if you do mainly just a juice fast or something like that, your stomach is this big. You guys know that? The size of your fist, that's your stomach. Okay, that's what it's supposed to be. It stretches out to more than 10 times that as we overconsume food. But if you fast, your stomach will shrink back down to that size. And if you've noticed, if you've ever broken your fast with fast food or pizza, you probably got violently ill. Does anyone want to raise their hand to that one? A couple people. Thanks for being honest. So there's a reason for that. I mean, that's what the size of your stomach's supposed to be. If you eat a small plant-based meal, it will fill up your tummy. You won't be hungry, and you'll get all the nutrition you need. So if you look at this 500-calorie plant-based meal, that means 3 500-calorie meals, if they're nutrient-dense, should be enough for the human body, right? Does that sound crazy? Who eats 1,500 calories a day? Okay, if you read a book by John Robbins called Healthy to 100, he studied 7 or 8 cultures around the world on every continent, probably not Antarctica, on all the other continents. And one of the things he found in common, he found multiple things that all these cultures had in common, but one thing that they had in common is almost every one of those cultures ate about 1,000 calories a day. And they were living into their hundreds with no disease. In fact, they would have one doctor in a village of 10,000 people just to treat, scrapes and bruises and broken bones and infections. So when you eat artificial food, you're forced to overeat to feel satisfied. This gives us a hypernormal amount of pleasure as it hijacks our euphoric pleasure centers. That's what sugar does. Sugar is a drug. It's technically a drug. It fits the definition of a drug. Roman numeral 5, healing the pancreas and diabetes. Good old Hippocrates, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. Nothing was more true to that than when it comes to diabetes. Letter A, good news. Diabetes can be healed. Regardless of what you're told out there, diabetes can be reversed. Now, type 1, again, much more challenging, different things going on, pancreas not functioning, much more challenging. But type 2 is being reversed all around the country right now. Now, if you want to see a good documentary on that, there's others, but I just gave you one to start with, Simply Raw. It's a movie about Dr. Gabriel Cousins, who has a place down in Arizona called the Tree of Life. And people go down there, and within 30 days, they're not diabetic anymore. And actually, within 2 weeks, they're not diabetic anymore. But he says 30 days. But within 2 weeks, most people are off all of their medications, and their blood sugars are normal. And in the movie, there's one guy, I think he was on like 20 medications. In 2 weeks, he was off all his medications. So this is an example of where he is natural health minded, but because he's a medical doctor, he actually monitors these people through this process. He's checking blood sugars. He's checking their blood work. He's making sure that everything's going okay. So these are the kind of partnerships we need with medical doctors. So we're just going to go over some basic principles to understand. It's probably not going to be crystal clear to you by the end of the class, but at least you'll have the general idea. For starters, I mentioned the 2 main foods that are causing the problem, excess carbohydrates and fats. We just got to define those. So letter B, understanding carbohydrates. Anything white, processed is a starchy carbohydrate. The obvious ones are going to be white sugar. I listed some of the names for sugar. That's why you got to read food labels. I always tell people that, the best way to read food labels, stop reading food labels, eat whole, fresh food. That's the best way to stop reading food labels. That's a joke, but I listed some of the names on packages that you'll find for sugar, and this is by no means exhaustive. Cane sugar, brown sugar, high fructose corn syrup, cane syrup, sucrose, maltose, dextrose, fructose, glucose. If it has an ose on it, it's sugar. Okay? Stevia, which is a great alternative, has no ose in it. It's a plant that God made just for us that's 200 times sweeter than sugar, so that we could satisfy that craving if we had the desire to. So you got to be really careful because sugar is in everything. Sugar is the main ingredient that they give in like Pediasure for children who aren't growing normally. If you look at the first three ingredients, they're all sugars. So we have to be really careful about what we're putting in our bodies. I'm also going to mention, because a lot of people, think they got things under control because they're not eating candy bars all day. We need to really understand what carbohydrates are. It's not just the obvious sugars. It's also all this white rice, even white russet potatoes, okay? The reason we have white potatoes is because of the fast food industry. They're monocrops. You heard of the Great Potato Famine in Ireland? The reason that all those people died of famine in Ireland is because they had one type of potato. There's no genetic strength in it. The Peruvians used to have hundreds of varieties of potatoes that they would grow in different areas, different elevations, different side of the mountain, depending on where the rain was. They had all this variety of potatoes. They practically lived just on potatoes and a few other vegetables. But then we pick the one potato we like, and we grow millions and millions and millions of acres of it. And what it does is it makes it a very, very weak plant. I think I mentioned that in a prior class. It's called monocultures. So they had one type of potato in Ireland, and here comes this one little bug, wiped it out because there was no strength in that plant. So same thing. If you're eating white potatoes, you're eating a monoculture, big fat lump of sugar. Really what it is. So you're much better off eating those fingerling potatoes or the red potatoes or the little Yukon Gold potatoes. If it's little and cute and funny shaped, it's probably better choice. So I just wanted to, I felt like I needed to stress that point about potatoes for some reason. But the white flour, that's a big one. The white flour, bread, pasta, pizza, crackers. Just everything processed, all our processed food supply. We got to eliminate it. It converts into sugar in the body. It's sugar. Letter C, understanding fiber. Without fiber, there's no controlled release of sugar into the bloodstream. So going back to the sugarcane example, right? Workers in the field were munching on sugarcane all day. Made them feel great. They had tons of energy. They never overconsumed it. It's hard to overconsume a stick. So apples are a better choice than apple juice, because if you eat an apple, it has phytonutrients, it's got fiber, it's got all things bound to it, so it controls the release of that sugar into the bloodstream. If you drink apple juice, you're going to spike your blood sugars and cause the same problems. And that's really what it comes down to, with eating whole foods too. People like, okay, well, I'm not eating white bread anymore, I'm eating wheat bread. Okay, you're still eating a processed, starchy carbohydrate. Is it better? A little bit. But you can definitely go the next step. What's the next step? Okay, let's say real quick, the next step would be whole grain sprouted breads, like your Ezekiel bread, Genesis 1:29 bread. Making your own bread. I also recommend doing the ancient seed grains, which I'm going to talk about here a little bit later, because they're not genetically modified, they're not monocrops, they're not near as starchy. Or ideally, it's just not eating bread anymore. And this is coming from somebody who grew up on grilled cheese sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly, and literally a whole loaf, I just remember this, a whole loaf of white bread and a jar of Cheese Whiz. I was golden. I did that all the time. Okay, so I know what it's like to try to stop eating bread. I know what it's like to stop eating sugar. My mom's having a heart attack right now. It's okay. It's not your fault. Okay. So to finish C, if you're not a diabetic, it's okay to have some fresh fruit juices as part of an active, healthy lifestyle. But don't fall for marketing. Okay? Don't fall for Cheerios are better now because it has more fiber. Okay? It's still a bleached, processed grain with sugar. Okay? Don't fall for marketing. We need to eat whole, fresh foods the way God designed them. That is what's going to bring us back to health. It's what's going to connect us closer to God's heart. because he wants us to eat what he made. He doesn't want us to eat things that cause sickness and illness in our body. Letter D, understanding fats. Healthy fats will stabilize blood sugar and provide balanced fuel during the day. I gave a list of what God created and what man created. It's pretty simple. God made these things, and man did this to these things. So stick with the list on the left would be my recommendation. And if you eat healthy fats, again, I'm just going to reiterate the fact that your body will burn those sustainably as fuel. And if you cut or severely cut back or limit your starchy carbohydrate sugar intake, your body will learn to burn fat as fuel. So you'll what? Lose weight. We also must be very careful with excess meat consumption, especially fatty meats. Watch Forks Over Knives. You know, there's a lot of documentaries out there about this. Food Matters. There's one called Eating that's pretty interesting. But we've seen skyrocketing heart disease, diabetes, and cancer since we've changed from mainly a plant-based eating culture to a heavy meat eating culture. The confusing thing is you can't just pinpoint one thing, like it's meat. And that's one thing I don't really like about a lot of these documentaries is they just focus on one thing as the cause for disease. I don't think it's just meat. I don't think it's just sugar. I think it's the fact that we've grown into a sedentary culture and we're eating everything processed, everything artificial, too much meat. It's the combination of everything. E, understanding liquids. Water and herbal teas should be the only liquids we consume. Raw dairy is a good choice for some people. Okay, I'm not totally against dairy. Dairy has been a food for thousands of years. We'll talk more about it when we get into the food classes about what's going on with dairy. But a raw goat's milk, I think, is your best bet. There are farmers around here selling raw goat's milk. You can get it. Aspartame, this is really scary. Okay, this is really, really scary. I'm not making this up. Okay, and you guys can probably attest to this. I've had people come into my office that said, my doctor did tell me to watch my sugars, so he told me to stop drinking regular soda and start drinking diet soda. Okay, that is criminal. Because the diabetic is also already in a compromised state of degeneration, where their nervous system is degenerating, the cells are degenerating, the cardiovascular system is degenerating. Aspartame is a neurotoxin that degenerates and breaks down the nervous system. So you are accelerating the disease process like you would not believe. I gave you a website called doorway.com, DORWAY.com, started by a guy whose father was damaged by aspartame. Aspartame is the number one complaint to the Food and Drug Administration because of toxic side effects and deaths. There's also a 1,038-page medical article I gave you here by Dr. Roberts called Aspartame Disease, an Ignored Epidemic. Letter F, what is the easiest solution to diabetes? Just in a nutshell, yes, it's complicated. Yes, food is complicated in our culture of processed everything and people trying to figure out what they can and can't eat. To put it in a nutshell, as close to the way God created it as possible. A whole food, plant-based diet. It sounds so simple and it's confusing because of all the different things we've created. So people have a lot of questions. We'll get more into those, again, when we get into the food classes, and we'll talk about each different category of foods. But ideally, we eliminate processed foods. These are your packaged, boxed, and canned foods. Yes, there are some, you can buy quinoa in a box, and the ingredients are quinoa. Okay, that's okay. I'm talking about read the food label, and if there's 32 ingredients and 29 of them look like another language, I wouldn't recommend consuming that food because it's not food. So the list is fried foods, bad fats, soda, energy drinks, coffee because it's dehydrating, half a cup or a cup a day. I know a lot of you are coffee drinkers. Processed sugar, baked goods, cookies, candy, ice cream, bread, cake, pasta. I could have listed 100 more things that we have in our food supply. I just wanted to give you an idea of all this processed stuff, you know. And then, like I said, minimal amounts of meat consumption and or dairy consumption. I always give people as a general rule of thumb, because people have been eating meat and dairy for thousands of years, make intelligent choices and eat what fits in the palm of your hand no more than once a day. Yeah, I don't think anybody's gotten just my personal conviction. Somebody might absolutely disagree with me, but my personal conviction that nobody has contracted diabetes or heart disease or cancer from eating a fist-size portion of fish once a day. You know, I think that's okay in my opinion. Now, if you want to be vegetarian, that's great. You know, I call myself a vegetarian that eats meat. I know it sounds funny, but I'm totally going that way towards vegetarian. I used to eat meat 3 meals a day, you know, just like a lot of Americans. And now I can literally go a couple of weeks and not eat meat. But if I want a piece of fish, I'll have a piece of fish. That's how I am right now. I'm not saying down the road I might be 100% vegetarian. You know, that's definitely the route I'm going. But you have to figure out what works for you. But the bottom line is if you eat too much and if you eat it 3 meals a day and you don't make wise choices, it's going to cause this problem. That's the point. Your taste buds will change. For those of you who are frightened. Sugar totally numbs and dulls and destroys our taste buds. Completely destroys our taste buds. It's the extreme of the extreme taste. We don't have bitter foods in our diet. We don't have sour foods in our diet. There's no balance. It's all sugar. So once you start eating real foods, it's going to be difficult at first, but when you start eating real food and stop eating artificial food, you'll learn what food tastes like. I read something that I think your taste buds only survive for like a week or something and you regenerate new ones. I think it's a week, 7 days. So if you start eating healthy, or maybe if you do a fast or something and then start incorporating healthy whole foods, your body will change. I used to hate vegetables. Okay, I grew up eating carrots, green beans, potatoes, and corn. That's probably it. If it wasn't one of those, it wasn't something I could consume. But now I love everything. I love vegetables because your body will change. Your body will desire them. Your body really wants them. Your children who hate vegetables, it's because they haven't eaten them. Okay, the body wants these foods. And I do have 100 recipes on my website. And every recipe on my website is 100% grain-free, sugar-free, dairy-free, and soy-free. So they would all be safe for somebody who has blood sugar issues. So letter G, this means yes to nuts, seeds, beans, and legumes, all the ancient seed grains, millet, amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa. They should be your new best friends. I love them. There's all kinds of recipes on my website using those. Oats, I'm not a big fan of gluten-containing grains. Oats is very low in gluten. And oats do have a lot of benefit for people who aren't sensitive to them. Fruits and veggies, if diabetic, I put a little side note, avoid high sugar fruits, dates, figs, bananas, grapes, for at least a few months until your body heals, okay? Because your body will heal very quickly. Again, if you get these processed foods out, the excess carbs out, the excess sugar out, and increase your healthy fat and quality protein intake. Again, protein, not necessarily meat. You know, it can be nuts and seeds and green foods, spirulina, chlorella, things of that nature. And then finally, H, we're about out of time. Additional recommendations. Exercise is critical. Again, you're going to burn it or you're going to store it. The amount of sugar entering your body needs to be equally proportionate to the amount of fuel that your body needs. And if it's not, it's going to store it. So that's why exercise is critical. You can just walk. You don't have to join a gym. Walking on treadmills is boring. I don't like to do it. You can walk, play tennis, ride a bike, find something you enjoy, just move. We're meant to move. Enzymes are the first line of defense for the pancreas. Enzymes are critical, just like I talked about in the beginning, the history of enzymes. Man, they're amazing, and they're the first line of defense to break down those foods that are entering your body so the pancreas doesn't have to go into overtime producing enzymes and enzymes and enzymes to deal with all the food you're putting in the system. Essential fatty acids give you fuel. Gave a few examples. There's the list up top. Trace minerals. Now, these are critical. Magnesium. So insulin helps to store magnesium. So when your cells become insulin resistant, you actually lose magnesium through your urine. You lose all the magnesium out of your body. So a lot of diabetics are chronically deficient in magnesium, which chronic deficient magnesium will cause soreness, achy joints, muscles, cramps, stress, anxiety, low energy, fatigue, those types of things. So supplementing magnesium is very important. Zinc. Zinc is critical for the pancreas, and the pancreas uses up a lot of zinc. Chromium helps to get the blood sugar into the cells so that the body can get sugar into the cells to be converted into ATP, which is energy, so that you can utilize it. And all diabetics are deficient in chromium. What's amazing is God's design is so awesome. One of the highest food sources of chromium is in green stevia. So the green stevia that is sweet, that we can use to not eat processed sugar and still get our sweet taste, is one of the highest known sources of natural chromium. I can't wait to ask God if that's an accident, but I doubt it was. And then vanadium. Vanadium actually works and functions kind of like insulin does. Another thing that I didn't put on here that kind of works that same way is juniper berries. Juniper berries actually function like insulin in the body as well. So that's another one you can throw down there. That would be great for diabetics. Vitamin A and D are important to protect the eyes and kidneys. Again, I'm just naming things that are chronically deficient in a lot of diabetics. Cod liver oil is great for vitamin A and D. And then I just listed a few herbs, finally. Herbs like Gymnema sylvester. Gymnema is nicknamed the sugar destroyer. That herb alone has healed people of diabetes. It stops sugar cravings. It heals the pancreas. It didn't get the nickname sugar destroyer for nothing. Stevia is the great sugar substitute. And aloe, nopal, cactus, cinnamon have all been used for centuries to help people balance their blood sugars. Amen. Sorry, I know we covered a lot. I even went over, and I felt like I was rushing, so sorry. Questions?
Can you explain a little more about the insulin resistance and what the mechanism of that is and how you reverse it?
Right, so the insulin resistance is so the function of insulin is to get sugar into the cells, okay, so that we have energy, we have fuel. When there's so much sugar in the bloodstream constantly, the cells form that protective layer, saying, I can't take any more sugar in. That's insulin resistance. The cells are resisting the insulin. Does that make sense now? The cells are insulin resistant. The cells are saying, no, I can't use you anymore because I don't want any more sugar in me. Correct. So you reverse it by getting the excess sugar and fats out of the bloodstream so that the body can start burning the extra as fuel. Does that make sense?
And how long does it take for the cells then to stop resisting?
A couple weeks. Yep.
My two questions. One, with the rise of so many dietary drugs or drugs that help you to lose weight, Avocare, Visalis, imagine there are hundreds of them out there. One, what do you think about those? Two, is where do you shop at for your Whole Foods?
Okay, so the first question is weight loss drugs. Are you talking pharmaceuticals or natural things or both? Or
Yeah, sure.
That's really kind of a complicated question. I mean, my goal, if somebody comes into my office, for example, and says, I want to lose weight, I don't give them weight loss products. Okay? I teach them how to eat well and get on a lifestyle program to where they will be healthy and their ideal weight within a few months. Because if you put them on a rapid weight loss program like HCG or something like that, these things that people are doing, it it alters the body in such a drastic way, and you haven't made any permanent lifestyle changes, you're just asking for it to come back. I mean, I know so many people have done HCG, and they're like, oh, that HCG worked really great. And then 6 months, they're like, man, but it all came back. Well, how did you get the weight in the first place? It wasn't an HCG deficiency, you know? So we have to make permanent, and I'm sorry if I sound sarcastic, but we need to make permanent lifestyle changes. There's no quick fixes or radical answers, you know? So in a lot of these weight loss products on the market, you'll lose water weight. You don't actually lose toxins out of the fat cells. Because like I mentioned in the last class, poison toxins store in your fat cells. So a lot of times you're just losing water weight. It's not really doing anything for your long-term weight loss. And then your second question was, where do you buy whole foods? In 2 months, it will be all farmers market for me for about 7 months, from May through October. Right now, unfortunately, I have to get a lot of stuff at Whole Paycheck, Whole Foods. I said that joke in another class for those of you who are new. And there's just not a lot of good choices. Now, there's some co-ops out there. I think IHOP has a co-op, and I'm not hooked up with it. So if anybody has some information about that, if it's good, I don't know. Okay, not fresh foods. There are some out there. Somebody actually yesterday just told me of one that I'm going to inquire about that I guess they get fresh produce, and it's organic, and they just started into Kansas City. So I'm going to look into that. So if I can find a co-op, I'll let you guys know. You know what you guys should do, if you're not already, is go on my website and register for my newsletter. Because when I do find a good co-op, or if one of you guys do, you know, that's something we need to do together. You know, we need to have community on these things. We need to all be planting gardens. We need to be sharing food. We need to be supporting local farmers markets. And we need to not be supporting giant multinational corporations like Whole Foods. And yeah, so when I find a co-op, I'll let you guys know. Because this one I heard of is like you have to buy 20 pounds of apples. Like that's the minimum. So, you know, we'll need some support.
Okay, so my question, or I have two questions. First one is the study that you gave us concerning milk being linked to diabetes and other diseases. Is that also regarding raw milk? I know we mentioned raw, that specific study. And then my second question is it better to kind of take the approach of, for your daily meals, to have one larger meal and then just to graze throughout the day? Or is it better to kind of divide your calories and nutrients into 3 equal portions?
That's a really good question. I'm going to answer the second one first. You have to figure out what works for you. There's a book written called The Warrior Diet. This was based off of Greek and Roman times, where the guys were out building or fighting or training all day long. They wouldn't eat anything, and they'd come home and eat a giant meal for the evening. And these were super strong, muscular warrior guys. It's called The Warrior Diet. My cousin, Ben, actually eats that way, and it works awesome for him. If you have blood sugar disorders where you're dipping a lot, you have to eat steadily throughout the day, every 2-3 hours. Ideally, some protein and some healthy fats like avocados or some nuts to give you sustainable blood sugars throughout the day. My personal preference, I don't honestly know if I have one. I mean, sometimes I eat 3 meals a day, and sometimes I graze all day. But what I graze on is like my blended Vitamix drink and, you know, some leftover buckwheat that I had in the morning or whatever, you know, and I just kind of graze on that all day. So there's just not I know that sounded weird, didn't it? There's not really an answer that works for everyone. You have to find what works for you. But if you eat a whole plant-based diet and you eat healthy, you know, you're not going to have the blood sugar problems and a lot of these things that are happening in our society. Your other question, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think raw milk causes any of these problems. The reason pasteurized and homogenized milk causes a problem is because pasteurized and homogenized milk is an excuse for the dairy industry to make a horribly dirty, disgusting product. I just posted an article on my Facebook the other day that a study showed that pasteurized, homogenized milk is 150 times more contaminated than raw milk, with pus and bacteria and viruses. It's just that it's dead because they've nuked it. Okay, it's an excuse to make a dirty, nasty product. So that's why milk is so dangerous. That's why cheese is so dangerous, because these pasteurized, homogenized foods are really, really disgusting. So as far as I know, the raw milk, yeah, if it's gone bad and there's some bacteria in it, you might get sick, but it's not going to cause these diseases as far as I know.
How much will supplements cost to do a mercury detox if you're getting the metal removed from your mouth?
I have on my website, you can check it out. There's heavy metal packages, and there's a little video of me talking about them. It just depends on how long you want to do it. 4 to 6 months, ideally. Cost-wise, it's hard to say. I mean, it just depends on what you do. I mean, you can just do chlorella tablets, and that detoxes metals out of the body, but it's going to take a long, long time. It'd be a great thing just to add to your diet. But if you want to do a serious heavy metal detox, like the product I have called Metal Free, I mean, it's pretty expensive. It's like $130 a bottle. So it just depends on what you want to do and how serious you are about it and how big of a problem it is for you. If you had a mercury toxicity and you knew it and it was destroying your health, you'd probably do whatever it takes as fast as possible. So it just kind of depends on what's going on with you.
You were talking earlier about breads, and I read in Above Rubies, if you've heard of that magazine, about sourdough bread with rye and spelt and how they thought that was healthier because of the way it works. Do you have any feedback on that particular bread?
I'm just not a fan of bread in general because of the way it's been processed. And yes, you can buy whole grains and make bread yourself, and there's other things you can do. And again, if you're in pretty good health and you make that sourdough bread and you eat that once a week, I doubt that's going to cause any problem at all. The problem is if we ate sourdough bread 3 meals a day, which we kind of technically do when we do bagels and toast in the morning and a sandwich for lunch and then pizza with some extra bread for dinner and things. That's the problem. If you have a bread that you like, and you don't, and it's a quality sprouted bread or even a sourdough bread, and you don't overconsume it, that's not a big deal. I'm not all like hardcore about everything. Is that a fair answer? Okay.
Okay, so beside the dangers of artificial sweeteners, you talked about aspartame or aspartame, whatever you call it. Can you speak to us about sucralose and Splenda? Is it true that they encourage your body's desire to store visceral fat as well as increase your appetite?
Yes.
There's a lot of weight loss products and shakes and stuff going around our community that's full of sucralose.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that, please?
Sure. All artificial sweeteners will make you fat. There you go. It's proven in studies. They've done it in study after study after study after study that artificial sweeteners increase visceral fat and make you gain weight. They're all neurotoxins, so they're all toxic and damaging to the nervous system. Aspartame's the worst, but sucralose, saccharin, I can't remember the others, but they're all toxic. So we best just use some raw honey, use some stevia. There's plenty of options out there. We don't need these things. The reason we consume them is A, we're not educated about it, and B, they're just like super dirt cheap. I mean, that's why high fructose corn syrup is like destroying America, because the cost on it is nothing, and the manufacturers go, oh, I can make my food taste good, and it costs nothing, and I can make millions of dollars. So what if everybody gets sick? But that's what's happening like with high fructose corn syrup.
Okay, so how do you feel about protein, like powdered proteins and superfood, like green, super green drink or whatever? Because I bought some of that, and
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, so I don't know because it's a process, and I've always wondered,
Yeah, it depends on the process. When I say processed, yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, you just got to find decent, good quality stuff. That's what it comes down to. When I say processed, and that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm thinking more of like these giant food companies that bleach it, that nuke it, that add chemicals to it, that add preservatives to it. It's an atrocity what they do and call it food, But it's mostly by these giant corporations. You get a small mom and pop company, like one I work with, that has a protein powder that's 100%, or half of it is bio-fermented sprouted brown rice and half hemp, and it's 21 grams of protein per serving, and it's raw. and they haven't heated it or anything like that, and it's a small mom and pop company and everything's organic. See what I'm saying? So a lot of it depends on the source and the quality of the product you're getting. So that's really why we want to know like what we're putting in our body.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay. So maybe like 2 more.
Can you go into a little bit of information about, on page 2, you've got the symptoms of diabetes, and you have peripheral neuropathy. And I do suffer from that, and I'm totally ignorant of it.
So like, what does that mean, peripheral
I'd love
neuropathy?
to know what to do to relieve the pressure, the pain.
Right. So it would just be the recommendations I made at the end. You know, by getting rid of the excess sugars and the carbs, doing good healthy fats, eating whole plant-based foods, and that will fix itself. See, that's the thing is we have this mindset that, oh, I have XYZ that's been, you know, diagnosed, so I need to take something for XYZ. That's symptom treatment. You know, so even if you go to a lot of natural therapists, they'll be like, okay, peripheral neuropathy, that's nervous system. You're probably B vitamin deficiency, so I'm going to give you some B12 injections. And you see what I'm saying? But that doesn't cure the underlying condition. The underlying condition is altering the diet, and then that will heal itself. But peripheral neuropathy is you're talking brain and spine and all the peripheral nerves going out. It's affecting your whole body. So you want to make some of those dietary changes. One more.
Vaughn, thanks so much for your time and sharing. First thing, a comment. Thanks for bringing up the aspartame because I did not realize it's feces from a genetically modified E. coli bacteria that Monsanto has the patent on. Yeah, I mentioned another name. And
he's more descriptive than I am.
I just saw what you're talking about. What you're talking about on the the pasteurization versus I saw that yesterday on a website, Infowars.com. Get a lot of health stuff on there. But would you mention a little bit about, because I haven't. This is the first course I've been to on sodium fluoride.
Sodium chloride?
Sodium fluoride.
Sodium fluoride.
The dangers of that, because you hear a lot of talk about eating raw and everything, but then the concentrations of sodium fluoride on foods that are so-called organic.
Right. So you're talking about is sodium fluoride like a you're not talking about like the fluoride, like fluoridation of the water and things like that. Same thing. Okay, gotcha.
Sodium fluoride.
Right.
Fluoride occurs naturally in nature, but
Fluoride.
sodium fluoride is it's a byproduct
Correct.
of aluminum and fertilizer production.
Exactly.
Number 1 ingredient in rat poison.
Yeah, so there's a lot of chemicals in our food supply. And one of them, if you just want me to give you a quick history of fluoride and where it came from, and I grew up going to a dentist who had me rinse with fluoride because it was good for my teeth. And there's absolutely no research or studies that prove that. But beyond that, if you look at where fluoride came from, fluorine is a natural mineral occurring in nature. The sodium fluoride that he's referring to is actually a byproduct of the aluminum industry. So in World War II, when they were making the bomb and creating the bomb, there's a huge aluminum company named Alcoa, and they were contracted to make some ingredients for this atomic bomb, and one of the byproducts of the aluminum industry was fluoride. Fluoride was so toxic and so damaging that they couldn't find anywhere to dump it legally. So what they did is they talked to the government, they paid some people, they fudged some studies, and they started putting it in our water and told us it was good for our teeth. So that's why there's this huge battle. Am I getting it where you were wanting to go?
Yeah, and even the Nazi scientists in World War II before that, they found
Oh, you're on it. So okay, I'll throw that out there too. They used it in World War II in the concentration camps against the victims. Yeah. So fluoride, again, is a neurotoxin, affects your nervous system. I have a lot of articles on the negatives of fluoride, but there's a big battle going on right now. People are trying to get fluoride out of our drinking water because it shouldn't be there. So I honestly don't know if it's still done in Kansas and Missouri or not, but there's a battle going on from it. But yeah, that's just one of, unfortunately, so many poisons in our food supply. So that's it. Thanks, guys.